develop so-and-so who has a lot of skill or something.
You mean like if one person wishes to be in the role, but another one gets chosen?
Yeah.
Sense of belonging seems to be an issue.
I want to answer briefly and then ask Gaia, because she has a lot to say about this, I suspect. The brief answer is, one can nominate oneself. So let's say that Reginald. Do you have a Reginald here?
No. Another name we don't have.
I can't use that name in England. So
take Jochen in the future.
Yeah, right.
Nobody.
But I can't use Hildegard in Germany either, can I? Okay, so Reginald nominates himself, and various people nominate Hildegard, and people say really nice things about Reginald, those that support that nomination. And Reginald say nice things about Reginald. And Reginald tells us why he wants it and says how his skills match the task and his characteristics match the characteristics. And then various people say similar things about Hildegard, and then the facilitator heard more reasonable arguments with more weight to them for Hildegard, and then the facilitator proposes Hildegard, and the consent is given to Hildegard. The consent is made to that proposal in the go-rounds. And then Reginald didn't get selected. However, Reginald got to hear a lot of really good things about himself from those people who nominated him and supported that nomination. And Reginald could always object to the proposal for Hildegard and say, and you say, oh, thank you, and then you go around and then you come back to him and then you say, could you say your reason? And he says, I want to do this so much that I have a different and new proposal, which is that we do it together. And, which could happen. Or that Reginald might say, or somebody in the room might say, how about if Hildegard does it for half the term and I do it for the other? Or some other kind of both and proposal. If you study DG, you're going to hear the both and proposal. How do we solve it? Meet the concerns. You hear that a lot. Perhaps Jerry has shared that with you, and your study group knows this very well. So my guess is that slowly through time, through experience of positive vibes and goodwill, people lighten up and feel more courageous and more willing to take on those roles. And the structure, which Gayatri knows a whole lot about, the structure is set up to bring out the best of us and not allow the worst. So the structure itself tends to protect against the kind of that can happen.
So one of the other fears that happens here is that you're not chosen. No one says anything nice about you. And so there's a concern here that, you know, that's going to happen, that, oh my God, someone's feelings will get hurt. So that's the
So let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready with your Rotten Tomatoes if you hear a politically incorrect statement? There's a politically incorrect statement coming up, I'm going to warn you. Got your bags of Rotten Tomatoes ready? Let's say Hildegard feels bad because she isn't aware of the effect of her frequent disruptive behaviors on the group, because when people try to give her feedback, if they even have the courage, she doesn't respond well and doesn't believe them or says blatantly, that would be their projection, I don't do that. Mm-hmm. Now that she didn't get chosen and nobody nominated her, she's got a little bit more reality on the fact that maybe that feedback might have had some truth to it, or maybe she still doesn't believe it and believes that she's been victimized. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you something. When we joined the cohousing community, which was about making a better world one neighborhood at a time, and creating a wonderful neighborhood and a safe place to live, and a place of congeniality, and 2 dinners a week, and a fabulous community building, did we sign up for that we would be emotional caretakers of unhappy people and choose therapy as our role in life?
You go, girl.
It was never spelled out that clearly.
No.
A lot of people just moved here to live in a nice neighborhood with people they knew.
Yeah.
Of course, of course.
We don't have this social, desire to...
A person who lives in a community could never dare say the thing I just said. That's why we have me come from more than 50 miles away with a briefcase. You could hear it from a stranger, and you probably go, yeah, I've thought that myself. I just wouldn't dare say it out loud. Although there are other people who would say, how dare you? Consider how Hildegard feels. Are you an unempathetic monster? Have you heard of NBC, for God's sakes? And the answer, I think, is keep your heart open to Hildegard, but don't nominate her. One of the kindest best things you could ever have in an incarnation is feedback about yourself, so you can basically use it to learn stuff. That's what I think. So, while there's a whole lot of energy in a community, and it's always fewer people than the majority, how can you say that? What is wrong with you? Why don't you care about Hildegard's feelings? Don't put up with it. Stand up, speak up, say, thank you so much. I do. I care about her. I just don't want her in that role.
And I care more about, you know, her growth, you know, and having an authentic relationship with her.
Yeah.
What kind of a friend and, you know, neighbor am I to her if I'm just, you know, lying and acting as though what she's doing is okay, and depriving her of some real authenticity. You know, and I can maybe assume and give her some credit that she can handle that. You know, to me it's not a rejection, it's kind of just feedback. So she wasn't elected for that role, which is very defined. She could take it like, you know, it's a global charge against her, but it's very specific to a given role and everything. And I think the more people are willing to just look at it that way rather than take things so personally, the more each individual and thus the whole group really grows and benefits. And when you have good structures like this, that's what's so beautiful. It's just, it creates a co-creative, growing, mutually beneficial, nurturing, caring kind of environment where people can, you know, can be more authentic and can grow and learn and admit that they don't know, or that they could learn about this and that. It's just much more real, and you know, there's not so much on the line. It's much easier than you might think.
And she could have nominated herself, and/or she could apply for another role by nominating herself for that role. So, God bless Hildegard, heart open, and yet firmness. What a good parent, right?
My experience here was that when we did do this and it was in the chicken meeting, there was no preparation for it. There was nothing that said, Lord, this was what the experience will be like. It was like, we're just going to try this tonight kind of thing. And I'm not being critical, Jerry, of this. So I was taken by surprise by all of a sudden this, like, what felt sort of like a popularity thing, or, you know, a nomination thing. It was I think if I had known beforehand what that process was, and heard why it might be useful or whatever, because I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I really hope no one nominates me because I'm way too busy. And then everyone like nominates other people, and there's like, they were saying all this praise about it. I was like, yeah. And then at some point it was kind of like, oh, no one never said, you know. and then I've actually been able to like see the people doing these roles in this chicken committee and going like, wow, they're doing a great job, and like really glad that they're doing it, because, and I'm not.
And you didn't have the time.
And so for me, you know, I think with some experience it would get easier, but also just knowing that that's the process, because it was startling, I would say.
Yeah, it's a very big
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. If a community is starting to do this, has any community, well, if our community were to start to do it, and we're starting to talk about it, one of the things I don't feel like everybody knows everybody that well. There's a core group that knew each other.
This is Carolyn from Pathways Community across the river in Northampton. There's a core group of people that were part of founding it, and then there's been a lot of turnover, so the core people know each other so well, and the rest of us don't really know that much about, you know, there's different levels of knowing. And I thought, we really ought to write stuff out about ourselves and have it that everybody reads it. Because I don't think everybody in our community knows all the skills that everybody has. Yeah, sometimes we haven't had a chance to implement them in the community itself. They may not know we've done bookkeeping or management or whatever we've done.
Yeah.
And there's also an element of people who are very charming, who are extremely popular, and are likely to get nominated because of that. And then people will bring in the skills, and it's not that they don't have them, but that they be primarily selected because they're the people that are the ones that shine.
However, remember, What's built into this is that people are chosen and proposed by a facilitator based on how the things that they're nominated for matches the requirements and the desired characteristics. The fact that I'm nominating Susie because I love her and adore her and she's wonderful and popular is not going to be compelling to the trained facilitator who thinks, but can she, collect eggs? And
Well, and I would just add that the charming person may be chosen the first year, but when it comes to evaluation time, it's like, maybe charming's got its points, but here we want somebody who can do X, Y, Z.
yeah.
And as far as people getting to know each other, with the dynamic governance, it's in Europe and in the Netherlands from where it comes, it's called sociocracy, and I forget the exact, translation, but it's circles of people who are familiar with each other. As opposed to democracy, which is, the
Just
public.
the people, yeah. By the way,
People, by virtue of using it, not only, are you more kept on track with the roles and reasons why you would be selected for a given task, but in the process of all the circles and doing all these different things together, and there's a lot of self-selection into the different circles, you get to know each other. You can't help but get to know each other really well. It's a structure to do it. That's why it's more than just a decision-making process. It's a structure.
and by the way, what it means in Dutch, which they got from Latin, I think Latin, Greek, whatever, is governance by peers and friends, peers and colleagues. Isn't that cool? I like that.
Good for you.
I missed a little section of the meeting, but I love that the 75% where you meet, you have a proposal, and then the person that objects really has to come up with clarity about exactly what they would like and meet with small groups. And to me, there's an article about that in one of these community magazines that that you wrote.
She wrote it.
I love that. So I'm like, so what's the difference? And that sounds sort of straightforward to me, to be very clear about consensus gathering versus decision-making and having a 75% or 80%. And what does dynamic governance add to
Governance. The flow of information, the flow of work, the flow of money, the flow of knowing who's doing what, when, and where. I think maybe you weren't here when we talked about it.
Well, I mean, you'd think I've been to a few million meetings about it, but okay, no, I wasn't here when you talked about it. I was
I'm
dealing with
not
phone calls.
suggesting.
Yeah. No, I wanted to, no, that was just helpful, just even
10
saying
million
that, the
meetings.
flow of information, yes.
Governance is about the flow of information and who's doing what, where, and how we all know it, and how it's completely transparent, ideally, right? And efficient and effective, ideally, and equivalent. We have equivalent voice. And the flow of money. When are we spending what money, where do we get it, and why, how do we choose, and blah, 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 blah. Where does it go, and how do we track it, and how do we have it completely transparent, and we have equivalence of voice. And
According to the mission, and aim.
See, I just don't
and,
get.
Wait, can I finish?
Yep.
Okay, and the project of works and tasks and projects. We know who's doing what, where, and who, and how, and we can track it. There is a beautiful system that looks like permaculture design applied to administration. That includes all of that and also includes decision-making. Now, Jerry knows all about that. And he can share that with you, and the people in the study group know all about it, and it has to do with circles and double links. You might have heard that. And we didn't go into that tonight, because this is a little tiny visit.
Right.
But it is beautiful, and it's self-organizing, and it's replicable, and it's fractal.
It's scalable.
And it's scalable, and it's a structure like the veins of a leaf or the layers of a tree that brings the nutrients up and down. That is the same everywhere. If you go to the little, it's the same as the big, and it flows the information from one end to the other, out, back. It's gorgeous.
Do you have issues of follow-through? And, I mean, it seems to me.
No, because you've got feedback
people are
loops.
really excited.
You've got feedback loops that prevent negative things from happening almost soon after they might even start or before they start. All you have to do is just spend some time with Jerry. He'll tell you how that works.
Well, I don't know if this is part of where that was going, but could you say something about the communities that are trying sociocracy and have run into difficulties?
Sure, but before I do that, I'd like to tell you how you can watch a 6-minute video of a community called Lost Valley Educational Center, Meadowsong Eco Village, that switched after 20 years of consensus with unanimity to dynamic governance. which they call sociocracy, them being all Dutch. And you can watch it on YouTube how they tell you why they switched, how they switched, and why they like it better, and how they feel freedom to try new things and freedom from the exhaustion of disappointment and demoralization.
Does
So how-
anyone get that?
How
So
is
they
that
can
possible?
send a link
Sally,
on
will
it?
you send out a
Jerry,
link?
would
What
you
is
send out a link
Hidden?
to us?
It's the fourth one down
What's the
on
name?
YouTube, Sociocracy Consulting.
Or Joe, can you?
So,
I just need the name,
Yeah, just say it.
well, I don't know the name of,
the community name.
oh, sure, Lost Valley Educational Center, but it's not on their website. Let me tell you how to find it. It's on a website called sociocracyconsultinggroup.com. Then you click resources and go down to videos. And it's the fourth video down on that page.
Sociocracyconsultinggroup.com, and then
Resources.
videos, no, resources and then videos.
Yeah, resources, and then it clicks videos and articles, and you click the videos one. And then there's quite a few videos on there. It's the fourth one down. Okay. All right. Now, Jerry, you asked about some of the challenges that communities ran into. There are two communities that are absolutely thriving with it. One is that one, and the other one is called Katywell Cohousing in Coleraine, Massachusetts. Another one which is
Katie will.
There's a
K-A-T-Y-W-I.
Cohousing in Coleraine? How old are they?
Not all.
5 or 6 years, and they're rural, but they're outside of town. We're going there. We're gonna learn everything we can, and we'll send it to Jerry, and you can read it. What are they doing, right, wrong, everything. There's another community thriving with it, Habitat Quebec, in Quebec City. Yep. Okay, now, what goes wrong? So let's say you have a bicycle, and you've learned that they are a very excellent vehicle, which helps you get from here to there without spending, this is a different one, without spending fossil fuels. And so you decide to get on the bike and ride that thing. So you decide for some reason you're going to pedal on this side, but let this foot drag. And you're going to hang on to this handlebar and steer over here, but let this arm just, play marbles or something, just stick it in your pocket. So you're doing like this, and you're falling over all the time, and the bicycle isn't going very fast or very far, and you're really off balance, and you get off the thing and go, damn, bicycles don't work. I know 2 co-housing communities that have been using some parts of dynamic governance, but not other parts, and their bicycle keeps falling over.
And they're blaming the bicycle.
Exactement.
So what parts are they
What are they
missing?
not using?
Well, there's about 5 or 6 things that you can do to
It's
make
too big a question.
the dynamic governance process. They're using some of them, but not others. For example, they're creating proposals, but they're not putting in the criteria for how to evaluate it or the dates for when to evaluate it, and then they don't evaluate it. They say, oh, let's try anything because we can do good enough for now, but it isn't for now, it's for damn ever. Here's another thing. They're doing dynamic governance elections, but they're not doing the role improvement feedback, so they don't get to let Susie know the things they'd like for her to improve a little bit. And then they don't trust the process anymore, but they're only using half of it. Here's another thing. They bring fully formed proposals like Athena, sprung from the head of Zeus, to the group and lay a big, fat, big, giant, complex proposal on everybody, and people go, I didn't have any input into that. What are you doing? That's too much. I'm not going to. But all they had to do was the proposal forming process, which is the most inclusive equivalence thing you ever saw in your life. And then they get a list of all the things they have to think about for the proposal. They consent on the completeness of the list. Then they come up with a lot of proposal ideas, some of which conflict. Then they get somebody to create a proposal based on all those ideas. Then they consent to whether the proposal has everything on the list. Then they send that proposal. Are they agreeing on the proposal? No, they're just agreeing that the proposal is complete.
The list of,
Yeah,
elements.
that it contains everything. What a good idea. Isn't that reasonable and rational? Let's look at the 2 roots of this. One root was Quakers and consensus, because the man who created it, a Dutch man named Gerard Hindenburg, grew up in the most famous Quaker school in Europe, with the most famous Quaker in Europe as the teacher. And the other parent of DG is engineering and feedback loops and cybernetics. Ooh, is that like cyborgs? Nope. Or Cylons? Or the Borgs? Okay, no, it isn't. It's the science of steering and control. Like when you control a bicycle with your ears and your eyes, the body weight, your kinesthetic sense, your feet, how fast you pedal, if you put the brakes on, how you turn it, you're consistently and constantly course correcting to get that bike to go where you need to go. And then you like bicycles instead of giving them up. Right? So with fairness, equality on the one hand, and engineering feedback loops and the science of steering and control on the other, voila, there comes this thing whose whole point is harmonious organizations. Now, has anybody heard that this got developed in a, are you ready to throw those tomatoes? Business? Ooh. Yeah, then it switched over to not only businesses, but also nonprofits. And not only that, communities. Heck, it's got scalability and universal applicability in that meaning. What are the values that give rise to harmonious organizations? Remember, it's mom and dad, engineering, cybernetics, Quaker, equivalence, transparency, efficiency. Engineers are practically fanatical about finding out if the thing works and then changing it for the better if it doesn't. Architects too, I'll bet you. So that's exactly what this has got built into it, along with equivalence. My God. This is why my community, which used to be known as Attila the Hun, is now a little bit more like Mother Teresa. Not quite yet.
A couple of questions.
Yeah, Mary.
Well,
And Mary.
it's interesting. I mean, this may sound like terminology, but I think it's important.
Sure.
I think of dynamic governance as, and you're alluding to it maybe here, as being a form of consensus, not opposed to consensus. So it's so I'm curious your thoughts about that. I mean, to me, it's a particular form of consensus. What's your thought on that?
Thank you for asking that. Does anybody else wonder that? A show of hands for anybody that might have been wondering? I think that's a common thing to wonder because, well, consensus does not include the circles and double links for the flow of work tasks, the flow of information, the flow of how we organize ourselves and how we keep track of it, and how we all could know anything at any time, or any of us could put input into the system that goes to all the other parts, like oxygen and the capillaries and the veins and the organs, could go anywhere.
It's not a structure.
What's that? Yeah, consensus. But
it is not a structure, but the decision-making method.
But I think what I'm trying to get at is the spirit of consensus. As I realize it gets into semantics at some point, but has to do with including everybody, and allowing people to speak up if they have an objection, but not to block unreasonably. I mean, that's the whole principle. And it seems to me that dynamic governance has a whole specific form around it and way of running meetings, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But I think, in my mind, it's not exclusive of consensus. I think it incorporates consensus.
Well, let's take one of those diagrams that shows you how a thing is the same and different.
Yeah.
Over here in DG, you have rounds where you go around, and you don't usually have open discussion where you call on whoever raises their hands and don't call on who doesn't. You do rounds. You just ask them. They can pass. And you can do that many times. So this energy gets built. That's one difference, although anybody using consensus could do that. You've also got a proposal which has criteria and times for evaluating it, but consensus could do that. What is different is over here in consensus, there's blocking. which, depending on the group's agreements, could mean, all right, that's it, go home. The thing is dead, we've killed it. Or I mean, Hildegard has killed it. Over here you have objections. Objections are gifts to the room to come up with a better proposal that somebody in the room or several persons or the facilitator or several people would come up with what is called in the thing a both and proposal, which means we're just like the in-street group, we're addressing the concerns of the person who has the objection or along with what the whole reason is we have the proposal. So that we come up with something that addresses both, if that's possible. There's a trick here, so just give me a sec. Okay. So let's say that a person objects because of, I can see a way to make it better. Or let's say they're objecting because there's something, I think there's something missing. Let's keep talking about this and figure out what it is. Or maybe they're saying, I have a kind of a feeling something isn't right, but I can't articulate it yet. Then the group helps them and the facilitator helps them kind of draw it out. If there's time, they might lay it aside and come back later and get some help for that person to kind of get what's here up to clear thinking. There's a requirement for blocking in consensus that ranges from, I don't want it, yeah, to, here's my clear, reasonable reason. Which is reasonable and can be demonstrated, etc. It's got data on it. In DG, it has to be reasonable and have data on it. If a person only has a vague feeling, because the group has respect for that person, ideally, and because they know the process, they help draw it out. So a vague feeling needs to lead eventually to a clear reason that is convincing to people, has data. Or maybe not data, but it's just logic. It's
too much data.
I just gave too much data?
Well, I'm just thinking it's after 9 and
I could pick this up with you later.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you more about that because
are you good?
what you're talking about seems how.
Well, I'm assuming people are voting with their feet.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to keep them here.
Well, still here are still here because they want to be here.
Okay, good. Just checking.
Thank you for checking. Okay, so that.
See, we have a long commute, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to decide what to do.
So what we're doing here that's different from here, Mary, is that the reason for blocking, depending on the group, doesn't have built into it the circle that cycles back with the transformed proposal, like in-street does. See how in-street's consensus method is more like DG than it is like regular consensus, because you're obligated to help either create or support or consider or try to work with. You need to be collaborative and cooperative. Okay, here's the question. What if you're not?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example, and you're going to find this just a little familiar. Let's say that there's the safety committee of a co-housing community, and they have to take up pet policies, and they take up pet policies, and the next time they meet, they take up the gun control policy. They have a member of their circle who says, absolutely no one can have guns here. I will not pass this proposal about safety rules regarding taking bullets out and locking cabinets, even though we have 2 hunters who are founders, and Bob, the off-duty policeman who has to carry his, whatever it is, Glock, with him, because that's what off-duty policemen do. No, we may have no guns here. The hunters and Bob will have to keep their off the property. And they said, but you're objecting to the proposal based on something that has to do with your personal value. And really, we're here to create safety in the community. We don't have an agreed upon rule in the community that nobody can have a gun. And Hildegard, I'll pick on her again, says, I'm sorry, I know very clearly what I want, and I know that we need to be a nonviolent community, and guns are made to kill people or else animals, and I do not want violence here, and I'm not allowing it. When we had this workshop that I was a part of and got to be at, and a bunch of co-housers from around New England came to it, we had 2 trainers, Jerry and John, and I kept role-playing this obnoxious woman who was completely serene and gracious but unrelenting in her viewpoint.
You did a great job, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I forgot that you were there. I'm so glad you said that. The actress in me is so glad. Okay, so finally John said, in a bit of frustration, do you remember this? He just sort of said, Diana,